It was a bright Saturday morning when Flight 227 was scheduled to depart from Seattle to Denver. The Boeing 737 carried 146 passengers, each lost in their own thoughts. Children laughed quietly in their seats, business people tapped away at laptops, and families whispered excitedly about their vacations. The cabin hummed with the normal sounds of a routine flight, completely unaware that this day would soon become one of the most terrifying moments of their lives. Among the passengers sat Emily Carter, a 17-year-old girl, headphones snug over her ears, sketchbook open on her lap. She wasn't just doodling clouds for fun. Emily had been fascinated by flying her entire life. Her father, a retired Air Force pilot, had taught her the basics of flying small aircraft since she was 12. She never imagined that knowledge would one day mean the difference between life and death. The flight began smoothly, engines humming steadily, and the plane climbed through the early morning clouds. As the seatbelt sign turned off, flight attendants began walking the aisles with drinks and snacks. Conversations bubbled around Emily, but she hardly noticed. Her gaze was fixed on the sky beyond the window, sketching the fluffy shapes drifting beneath the sun. Then, without any warning, a violent jolt shook the cabin. Trays flew into the air, drinks spilled across laps, and passengers were thrown forward in their seats. A metallic groan reverberated through the fuselage. A hush fell over the cabin, broken only by frightened whispers and the soft cries of children. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." Then came silence. The plane shuddered again, harder this time. A flight attendant sprinted toward the cockpit, pounding on the door in desperation. Seconds later, the co-pilot stumbled out, pale and shaking. "The captain's unconscious," he yelled. "We've lost hydraulic systems. The controls aren't responding." Fear spread like wildfire. Mothers clutched their children. Businessmen crossed themselves in silent prayer. Oxygen masks dropped from the overhead compartments and passengers put them on, panic mounting with every second. The world inside the cabin had become a chaotic storm. Amidst the chaos, Emily removed her headphones, her heart racing. She recognized the pitch of the engines and the irregular roll of the wings. It was the unmistakable sign of stabilizer failure. Every flight manual her father had left her, every simulator session, every lesson she had been taught, all of it clicked into place. Then the moment came that would forever change everything. The co-pilot's trembling voice echoed across the cabin. "Is there anyone on board who can fly an aircraft?" Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Passengers stared at each other, paralyzed by fear. A mother's hands shook as she held her infant. A businessman whispered a prayer, and nobody dared to move. Seconds dragged like hours, and then from row 14A, a soft but firm voice cut through the fear. "I can try." Every head turned toward Emily. She stood up slowly, knees trembling, heart pounding, but her eyes held determination far beyond her years. The co-pilot blinked, uncertain he had heard correctly. "You?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, my father is a pilot. I've trained on simulators and I know the basics. Please, let me help." With no other choice, the crew guided her to the cockpit. Outside, dark clouds roiled like angry seas. Alarms were flashing red, and the plane was losing altitude slowly but steadily. The co-pilot gave a rapid briefing. "We've lost most hydraulics. The controls are stiff. We're low on fuel, and the captain is unconscious. You have to take over." Emily climbed into the captain's seat, gripping the yoke. Her palms were sweaty, but her grip was steady. She whispered to herself, recalling her father's constant advice. "Stay calm. Airplanes are built to fly. You just need to guide them." Reaching for the radio, her voice was small but clear. "Mayday! Mayday! Flight 227. The captain is incapacitated. I'm a student pilot taking control." Air traffic control on the other end went silent for a heartbeat, then quickly came back with urgent instructions, rerouting nearby traffic and preparing emergency crews. Fighter jets were scrambled to escort them if communication was lost. The eyes of the world, unknowingly, had turned to a 17-year-old girl trying to land a Boeing 737. As the plane trembled through turbulent clouds, Emily began to focus. Every instrument in the cockpit became a lifeline, every switch and dial a tool she had practiced on countless times in simulators. She called out settings, adjusted throttles, and listened carefully to the co-pilot's voice. Together they worked as a team, battling the storm above and the chaos inside the cabin. Emily had never felt fear so sharply, nor responsibility so heavily. The lives of 146 people rested in her hands, strangers, friends, families, children, and she could feel every heartbeat around her sync with hers. This was no longer a flight. It was a test of courage, instinct, and training, and there was no room for mistakes. Through the dark, the thunder, and the chaos, Emily's mind became clear. Each movement of the controls was deliberate, each decision precise. She was no longer just a passenger. She was the captain, and in that moment she realized something profound. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was action in spite of it. The plane was now caught in the wrath of an unexpected storm. Dark clouds loomed outside, lit intermittently by flashes of lightning. Turbulence shook the Boeing 737 violently, tossing passengers and service trays alike. The cabin, once filled with quiet chatter and the soft clinking of cups, was now a theater of chaos. Screams and cries pierced the air as the aircraft pitched sharply left and right. Emily, seated in the captain's chair with the co-pilot at her side, felt the yoke resist her every movement. The hydraulics had failed almost completely, and controlling the plane required a delicate balance of strength and precision. One wrong pull, one overcorrection could mean disaster. The co-pilot barked out altitudes and speeds, his voice trembling despite his experience. "We're losing altitude. 28,000, 7,500. Adjust pitch!" In the cabin, fear spread like wildfire. Passengers clung to each other as the plane rocked and jolted. Oxygen masks dangled over anxious faces, and the flight attendants were shouting instructions over the roar of wind and the engines. One mother whispered to her child, "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," but even she didn't believe the words herself. Outside the plane, the storm raged with unrelenting force. Sheets of rain slapped against the windows, and lightning illuminated the fearful expressions of those trapped inside. Emily's mind raced, running through every lesson her father had ever given her. Keep the wings level. Control your descent. Trust the instruments. She took a deep breath, her hands gripping the yoke, muscles tense, yet controlled. Then came the first, real test. A sudden, violent drop. The plane's nose dipped sharply, sending a wave of panic through the cabin. Drinks spilled, children screamed, and phones fell to the floor. Emily fought to pull the nose up, using every ounce of strength to counteract the failing hydraulics. Sweat beaded on her forehead as the co-pilot shouted numbers and altitudes, trying to guide her through the crisis. "Flaps!" she barked, realizing they needed more lift to stabilize. The co-pilot quickly adjusted the settings, and the plane leveled momentarily. But the reprieve was brief. Another violent lurch sent a tray of food hurtling across the aisle, narrowly missing a passenger's head. Emily's stomach churned, but she forced herself to focus on the instruments. Outside the storm, there was only chaos, but inside, she could still fight. She radioed air traffic control again, her voice steadier this time. "Denver approach, Flight 227. We are experiencing severe control issues. The captain is incapacitated. I'm a student pilot taking control. Request immediate emergency landing clearance." The silence on the other end was palpable. Then crackling over the radio came an urgent response. "Flight 227, we've cleared you for emergency landing. Runway 16L, fire and rescue are standing by. Maintain control. Help is on the way." Emily exhaled slowly, knowing this was her only chance. She adjusted the throttle, keeping the plane level, despite every warning sign flashing in the cockpit. The co-pilot called out readings with precise cadence. "Altitude 20,000. 8,500. Prepare for approach." Passengers had begun praying aloud now. Some clutched seatback handles, eyes wide with terror. Others whispered to the person next to them, sharing final words or memories. Emily could feel the weight of every life in the plane pressing down on her shoulders, but she could not afford fear. She could not let panic dictate her actions. Minutes felt like hours. Each second required meticulous calculation. Descent rate, airspeed, angle of approach. Lightning illuminated the faces in the cabin as Emily focused solely on her instruments, suppressing the fear threatening to rise. She remembered her father's voice from years ago. The sky doesn't panic. Neither should you. Act decisively, and it will follow you. The turbulence worsened as they approached Denver. Crosswinds threatened to push the plane off course, and the storm's fury made visibility near zero. Emily adjusted the yoke with precise micro-movements, her knuckles white but her mind sharp. The co-pilot, though exhausted, guided her through, confirming every small correction she made. "Stabilize! Wings level! Altitude steady!" he shouted. Emily nodded, her body trembling, but her determination never wavered. Every action, every adjustment mattered. Outside the storm roared, but inside the cockpit, a sense of focus and clarity emerged amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, cabin attendants continued to manage terrified passengers, reassuring them even as they themselves were gripped by fear. One flight attendant whispered to a row of children, "We have a very brave girl up front. She's going to help us land safely." The words barely made it past the sobs of the children, yet a small spark of hope ignited. Finally, Denver's approach lights pierced through the storm's darkness. Emily's heart raced, not just from fear, but from the sudden glimmer of hope. She guided the plane toward the runway, each small correction bringing them closer to safety. The co-pilot's voice was calm but urgent. "You're doing it." Almost there. The storm was still raging, the plane still a wild beast of metal and wind, but Emily had become its master, guiding it inch by inch, breath by breath toward the earth. Every action was deliberate, every decision critical, and for the first time, she felt the real weight and responsibility of being in control. The cockpit was a war zone of alarms, blinking lights, and the constant roar of the engines struggling against the storm. Every second was critical. Emily Carter, 17 years old, had never flown a commercial airliner before, but in that moment, she was the only person standing between 146 lives and catastrophe. She gripped the yoke tightly, her knuckles white, her mind racing yet crystal clear. The co-pilot, exhausted and pale, monitored the instruments, his hands shaking as he tried to assist her. "We've got partial hydraulics," he said. "Controls are stiff. You'll need to apply more force for every small movement. Don't overdo it too much and we could flip." Emily swallowed hard. Her body trembled, but she steadied herself. She remembered every lesson her father had drilled into her over the years. Trust the instruments, trust yourself, stay calm. Her gaze flicked between the altimeter, airspeed indicator, and attitude display. Each gauge was a lifeline. "Flaps 20 degrees, she instructed, recalling the proper configuration for landing. The co-pilot adjusted the setting immediately. "Landing gear down?" she asked. He confirmed with a nod. The aircraft responded sluggishly, every control input taking more effort than it should have. But it responded. That was enough. In the cabin, panic had turned into tense anticipation. Flight attendants clutched each other, offering reassurance where they could. Passengers whispered prayers, some weeping quietly, some silently mouthing words of encouragement to the brave girl in the cockpit. "She's our only hope," a mother whispered to her son. "She'll get us down safely." Emily's mind went into hyper-focus mode. The storm outside still raged, lightning illuminating the cabin and cockpit intermittently, thunder shaking the fuselage. Every gust of wind and each jolt threatened to push the plane off course. But she countered each movement with measured precision, her hands moving almost instinctively. "Denver Control. This is Flight 227, she radioed again, her voice steady but urgent. "We are on approach. We've lost full hydraulic control, but we are managing, requesting priority clearance for landing on runway 16L. The reply came immediately, calm but tense. "Flight 227, emergency services are standing by. You are cleared for immediate landing. Winds are gusting. Maintain control." Emily exhaled slowly, but only for a moment. She had no time for relief. The runway was their target, the only thing that could save them from disaster. She could feel the plane descending unevenly, the storm pushing against them like a living force. The co-pilot's voice was a lifeline. "Adjust to the left." No, wait, hold steady. Altitude 500 feet. Each passing second felt like an eternity. Emily had never been so aware of every subtle shift, every vibration, every sound the plane made. She adjusted throttle and pitch carefully, feeling the aircraft respond, sluggish but obedient. She felt the plane begin to straighten out for the approach, but the storm wasn't finished yet. A violent gust pushed them off the center line. Emily reacted instinctively, pulling slightly on the yoke, compensating for the wind shear and slowly guiding the plane back toward the runway lights. Good. Good, the co-pilot muttered under his breath, a rare smile breaking through his tension. Emily didn't have time to react. She kept her eyes fixed on the instruments, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Meanwhile, passengers were beginning to sense the skill guiding them down. Some whispered prayers, some held hands with strangers, and some stared wide-eyed at the approaching runway through the small windows. Fear was still there, but so was hope. Hope that a teenage girl had taken control and could land them safely. Emily had reached a critical moment. The plane needed to flare for landing. She adjusted her pitch slowly, feeling the resistance in the yoke, counteracting the failing hydraulics. The nose of the plane lifted just slightly. The wheels touched down, hard but stable, on the slick, rain-soaked runway. The plane bounced once, twice, then began its long, skidding roll along the tarmac. Fire trucks flanked the sides, lights flashing, ready for any unexpected outcome. Emily kept the yoke steady, carefully guiding the aircraft to a complete stop. A cheer erupted in the cabin. Passengers hugged, cried, and whispered thanks to each other, and to the brave girl who had saved them all. The co-pilot leaned back, exhausted, and muttered, "You did it. You actually did it." Emily's hands shook as she powered down the engines. Relief washed over her in waves, but she remained alert, aware that this wasn't the end. Safety came only when everyone disembarked. When passengers left the aircraft, emergency personnel swarmed the plane, helping people onto ambulances and transport vehicles. The news crews were already gathering outside the airport, cameras rolling. The world would soon know what had happened. A 17-year-old girl had landed a commercial jet under extreme emergency conditions. Emily's father watched the news from home, disbelief and pride flooding him. He had taught her to fly small planes, never imagining that one day she would guide a fully loaded 737 through a storm to a safe landing. His hands trembled as he whispered, "That's my girl." Though the world would later call her a hero, Emily felt something different: humility, relief, and a deep understanding of what courage really meant. She had stood up when no one else could, faced fear head-on, and trusted her training and instincts. And in doing so, she had changed the lives of every single person on that flight. For Emily, that landing wasn't just a demonstration of skill, it was a moment of awakening. She had discovered a strength inside herself she had never known existed. She had faced the storm, guided the plane, and carried everyone safely to the ground. And in that cockpit, amidst the alarms and the lightning, she had become more than a passenger. She had become a hero. The storm was relentless. Rain lashed against the windows, and gusts of wind threatened to push the plane off course. But inside the cockpit, Emily Carter's focus was unwavering. Every instrument, every gauge, every subtle vibration of the aircraft became her guide. The co-pilot, exhausted yet alert, continued to support her, giving precise readings of altitude, speed, and alignment. They were approaching Denver International Airport, but the storm made the final descent one of the most challenging tasks any pilot could face. 5,000 feet, the co-pilot called. Emily adjusted the throttles carefully, keeping the plane level. She could feel the metal groaning under stress, the hydraulics barely functioning, but she was determined. The runway lights pierced through the sheets of rain, tiny beacons of hope in the darkness. She swallowed hard and whispered to herself, "Stay calm. Trust yourself. Trust the plane." Inside the cabin, passengers were gripping their seats, eyes wide with fear. Some whispered prayers, some held hands with strangers, and children clutched stuffed animals like lifelines. Flight attendants walked the aisles, offering quiet words of encouragement, their own fear masked by professionalism. The entire plane seemed to hold its collective breath. Emily adjusted the flaps and landing gear one last time, listening intently to the co-pilot's guidance. "You've got this," he muttered under his breath. "You're in control. We can do this." As they descended to 2,500 feet, the turbulence intensified. Lightning flashed, illuminating the determined expression on Emily's face. Every passenger could feel the intensity through the shaking seats, but Emily remained laser-focused. She knew the next few moments would decide everything. The plane's nose dipped slightly, then leveled, then dipped again. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She had never felt fear and determination so intertwined. "Runway in sight," the co-pilot announced. Emily lined the plane up perfectly, micro-adjusting the yoke to counteract the crosswinds. She began the flare, the moment the nose lifts to allow the wheels to touch down safely. She pulled back gently, feeling the resistance, and the main wheels made contact. A harsh thud echoed through the cabin, but the plane held firm. The plane bounced once, then settled, skidding slightly on the wet tarmac. Emergency vehicles flanked the aircraft, lights flashing and sirens wailing, ready for any unexpected mishap. Emily kept her hands steady, gradually slowing the plane until it came to a complete stop. The cabin erupted in cheers, tears, and hugs. Passengers who had been terrified mere minutes ago now clung to one another, whispering gratitude and disbelief. The co-pilot exhaled deeply, his face pale but relieved. You did it," he said softly. Emily's hands shook, but a smile broke across her face. She had never felt such exhaustion and triumph simultaneously. She powered down the engines but remained vigilant, ensuring everyone was safe before leaving her seat. When the passengers disembarked, emergency personnel assisted them, checking for injuries and offering reassurance. Cameras and news crews had already arrived, capturing the moment that would soon make headlines worldwide. 17-year-old girl lands commercial jet in mid-air crisis, the headlines screamed, but Emily remained quietly proud. Not seeking attention, only relief that everyone had survived. Her father, watching from home, could hardly breathe as he saw his daughter on the news. The little girl he had trained in small aircraft simulators had guided a fully loaded Boeing 737 through a life-threatening storm. Tears streamed down his face. "That's my Emily," he whispered, voice cracking. "My little girl, my pilot." In the following days, the story spread like wildfire. Passengers wrote letters and social media posts praising Emily's bravery. Aviation authorities commended her, and airlines cited her story in safety and emergency response programs. News anchors interviewed experts, all marveling at the courage and skill of a teenager in such extraordinary circumstances. But for Emily, the greatest reward was far simpler. Sitting in a small Cessna a few months later, she glanced down at the clouds beneath her. The memory of that day, the fear, the responsibility, the adrenaline, remained vivid, but so did the realization of her own strength. She whispered to the sky, "We did it, Dad," feeling a deep connection to the father who had taught her to love flying, and to the people whose lives she had saved. Emily's story became more than just a tale of courage. It became a lesson in calm under pressure, in facing fear, and in the extraordinary power of ordinary people. She had stood up when everyone else hesitated, had trusted her training and instincts, and had taken decisive action in a moment when the world needed a hero. Months later, at a ceremony recognizing her bravery, Emily spoke softly. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Today, I learned that fear can guide you if you let it teach you, but it must never control you." The world remembered that day not just for the storm, the near disaster, or the trembling passengers, but for a 17-year-old girl who proved that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they simply rise when the world asks, and they do what must be done, no matter the odds. Flight 227 became a symbol of hope and courage, and Emily Carter, the girl who stood up slowly but with unwavering determination, became a hero whose story would inspire generations. The sky, which had once threatened to consume them, now seemed to bow to her courage. She had changed the lives of 146 people and reminded the world that bravery often comes in the most unexpected forms. And in that final moment, as emergency crews applauded and passengers whispered their thanks, Emily smiled quietly, knowing that she had faced the storm and had emerged victorious.